this is Kim, the Kiwi Health Detective, root cause and lifestyle medicine practitioner. And I have what I hope and I feel personally is a very interesting topic to look at today. And it's a mix of things which encompasses looking at the role of the mind and thoughts and the heart and love in healing, and why it's so important to understand how our mind, our thoughts, information, chi, emotions, and our heart, and in particular love versus fear, play a massive role in healing and also in creating illness to start with, which we then have to heal. So I'm just going to start by giving a little mini lesson on Qigong. Now, Qigong is not particularly well known, although it is becoming better known. And Qi means energy or information, and Gong means to cultivate. So Qigong is the skill of cultivating and growing and improving one's Qi. And in the Eastern philosophies and Eastern countries, Qi is very, very important, but it's not really spoken about in Western medicine. It's talked about in yoga, for example, in India, where they call it prana, and it's talked about in China and Korea and other Eastern countries where it's called Qi or Qi. But most people don't really understand what Qi is until they learn about it. So one of the easiest and simplest ways to describe Qi is to say that it is energy impregnated with information. And scientifically, so to speak, I have heard and learnt that Qi is energy plus information plus a small amount of mass. So it does have some mass, even though it tends to be seen as invisible. So Qi is energy impregnated with information, or energy plus information plus mass. And it is the information that is very, very important to understand, because it is the information which forms the Qi and informs the Qi. So in other words, if we have healthy, life-giving information infusing our Qi, which turns into matter in our body, then we're more likely to have a healthy body and a healthy mind and healthy emotions. Although when I say healthy mind, it is the mind itself that is infusing the Qi with this information. So when we have uplifting, positive, healthy information, which we're infusing our Qi with, we will be healthier. On the other hand, if we have unhealthy, negative, harmful information constantly infusing and informing our Qi, our energy reserves, which turn into physical matter, then we're more likely to have problems turning up, aka illness or mental health issues or emotional ups and downs or unhappiness and suffering. So for example, if somebody grows up in an environment where they're constantly being criticized and judged and humiliated and put down and told that they'll amount to nothing, then that is going to create emotional responses in the body, such as sadness or hurt, or maybe they're in an environment where they don't feel safe because people are being hit or abused in some way, and so the body creates fear. And as a result of these emotional responses and the body going into the stress response over and over again, then people start to unconsciously create beliefs about themselves and about life and about other people, such as I'm not safe, or I don't feel safe around people, or I don't like people, or it's not safe to be with people, it's not safe to be open and vulnerable, I don't like myself, people keep telling me that I'm not a nice person, so I mustn't be a nice person. I could talk for days on the types of beliefs that we create as a result of how we feel and what we experience in our environment. But the point is that we develop certain ways of thinking and certain ways of responding emotionally that we then turn on ourselves, if you like. It's very classical that if we're told that we're not good enough and that we're not a nice person and that we don't deserve to be happy or whatever it is that we're told, then we just keep telling ourselves these things. And the more negativity we put into our thoughts and put against ourselves, that starts rewiring the cells into a state of dis-ease. And then later down the track, we manifest some sort of illness. So this is why it is so important to work on understanding our feelings and being able to clear and dissolve and discharge negative feelings, to become aware of our thought patterns. Are they positive and life-affirming, or are they negative and life-depleting? And only we can do this. Nobody else can do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves. But it's so important to become aware of our feeling nature, our thought patterns, and get on top of how we're thinking and feeling about ourselves, because this has a direct consequence on our body, on the physical matter of our body. And Qi is the building block of the physical body, of the cells, of the atoms, of the molecules. Qi is the building block at a quantum level. And the interesting thing about Qi is that Qi can transform into matter, and matter can transform into Qi. They can change back and forth, which is why, for example, with the right thoughts and feelings and vibration and frequency, we can dissolve a tumor and we can transform illness in the body. It's all about changing the frequency, the vibration, the feeling especially, and the thoughts. We have the power to do this, but it's not something that we've learnt in school because there's not enough education about this going around. But hopefully in another 100, 200 years, it will be much more common. So this first excerpt from this interview by Renette Senum, which is a very interesting podcast I listened to recently, which prompted me to do this podcast today, is about matter and energy and how we can change matter using the information that we send from our mind.
And what I want to say is that, because sometimes there is a little bit of misunderstanding, I see that in my students. We have a magnet, okay? And you see the magnet and it looks like it's doing nothing until you put some iron fillings. And when you put the iron fillings, you see how the matter is organized according to what the energy is showing.
Yeah.
So there is a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is information, energy, matter. The matter is the result of the energy, of the substance, but also of the process. Okay, there are two things that they are there. So when I'm seeing the energy, I'm seeing a process. I'm seeing what is happening. And this is the blueprint in which the body is built. And this has been scientifically demonstrated. I can show you images of the electromagnetic field as the blueprint, where the cells then are going to start developing. You have the blueprint electromagnetically in the embryo before you have the eyes, before you have the mouth. You can see those fields, electromagnetic fields there. So there is a hierarchy in which the energy is what defines how the matter is going to work. So this energy, of course, we cannot separate these three things. This could be spirit, soul, and body if you want to. So this goes together. So when you have the energy, what you have is a process that has an information and has a purpose. The problem here is when this matter that has a field, that has an information and a process, is synthetic. It's not aligned with life. So you can see that in many different ways, but for me, this is a very easy way of understanding. Yes, we have a scaffold, and on top of this scaffold that is energetic is that the body is working. That's why if you change the information, either because you have a hypnotist that is very good and do it, either you have Jess that is working in you, you change the information that are the codes that energy is doing the process with. So once you change the information, then you change the matter.
Wow.
That's a way, because there is a hierarchy. It's because most of the people think in the matter and they think, okay, yeah, because of the duality and the wave and the particle, every time that I have a particle, I have a wave. Well, no, you have the wave. And because you have the wave and because you have the field, that's why matter exists. Because there is ether, is that matter exists. Wow. It's not the opposite.
Yeah. Right.
So what was also interesting is when Anna Maria was talking about the scaffold. And in the more Western way of looking at things, we talk about the aura and the different layers that the aura has, such as the etheric layer, the astral layer, the mental layer, the causal layer. We have many different layers in our auric field. And our etheric body is the scaffold for building the physical body. And in our Western world, of course, we've become so used to just trying to deal with things physically. And in fact, before I forget, just to mention that some years ago, I created a program called The 5 Levels of Healthcare Consciousness in You. And in it, it went through the different approaches to dealing with health issues, whether you're dealing with them on a physical level, an emotional level, a mental level, an energetic level, a spiritual level, the 5 core parts of a human being, and how as your consciousness transforms and elevates, you will choose different types of health modalities. It's just a natural thing to do, because when we're very unaware about all of this type of information, we will mainly focus on trying to heal things at a physical level. But the problem is, the actual start of the problem is usually not at a physical level. The physical is just the end result. The start of the problem or the cause of the problem almost always lies more at an emotional, mental, energetic, spiritual level. So we also need to remember to address the etheric template in our auric field, which is the blueprint for the physical body. And if you want to learn more about that, then go and read some Barbara Ann Brennan books, and she goes into great detail about this. But as Anna Maria says in this podcast, if you change the information, you change the matter. So it's so important to understand what is the information that is already trapped, if you like, in my matter, in my cells, in my organs, in my tissues. And in Lifestyle Prescriptions, this is all mapped very, very intricately to show how emotional conflict themes are stored in different parts of the body. It's very, very precise. But even without going into such precision, we can learn and start to create new habits of sending good, positive, healthy information into our body, which literally has a positive knock-on effect at a cellular level. It affects our cells, and therefore it affects our body in a positive way. So this is a very big topic, which I'm only just scratching the surface here, but hopefully you get the gist of the importance of this topic. So I've already alluded a little bit to the role of emotions and illness, and that has been a big part of my personal journey and helping other clients over the last 25 years to self-heal. And sometimes it can be very difficult to explain how exactly do emotions create illness. It can sound a little weird. So let me play you a clip from another part of this podcast where one of the presenters talks about the connection between emotions and illness.
And so I wanted to just touch upon what Dr. Marizel was saying, because I absolutely agree with the fact that, you know, when we are infused with fear, when we have these, what I call partially digested emotions from years and years of not knowing how to feel them back through the body, we become a storage facility for these emotions that are, the way I talk about it, just for the ease of languaging and visualization, is that it's almost as if our body will not if we're not able to feel the amount of fear that we were subjected to as a child, or the amount of shame that we were subjected to, or the amount of anger, or whatever the emotion is that came in as a dissonant waveform, because we're made of light, if that emotion that comes into the system doesn't really, it's like oil and water, right? It doesn't really like mesh well with the frequency that we come in as, which is pure love, then it stores. And it gets kind of smushed into what Eileen McCusick has called a standing biophotonic wave. And some of that emotion is actually stored, the waveform of it is stored in the biofield somewhere very specific. And then the other part of that emotion, the biochemical part of that emotion in a storage form, is stored somewhere specifically in the cells of our body anatomically. And those two parts of the emotion are actually holding in their standing wave form until the time when they can come back together again and dissolve and transmute. And then they actually start to vibrate back in that coherent stream of light.
Wow.
So that's a lot of the work that I teach with my former partner, who's my dearest friend in the world, Claire Garner, who's an intuitive emotional healing guide. She helps people feel feelings, because when we cry, when we emote, when we really allow them to come back through tears, through the body, through crying audibly, vibrational crying, that emotional energy actually, it dissolves back into the voltage that it started as, the high frequency light, which is in the frequency stream of love. So that's what I feel going on here. We come in pure. We come in as pure biophotonic light. Any one of us who's ever held on to a newborn baby who's had a healthy birth falls in love. I have a 9-week-old kitten right now. I cannot get enough of her. I mean, I'm just obsessed with her because there's no dissonance in her body. It's just pure light, and she sits on my chest and purrs, and she like stations by my head at nighttime, and she just stays there. And I'm just in a bubble of light in my life right now, which is so incredible because that's our innate resting frequency, right? So anything that's not that, it stays in our body, because once we digest it, it comes back to light. So our voltage goes up.
Wow.
So the shadow side of that, which is really what we've been talking about, is that when we have a lot of these emotions in storage, whether they're both in the biofield and in the body, they communicate with one another. They get activated. They get triggered. So if we've been very traumatized because we grew up in a household that wasn't safe, and our body as a result doesn't feel safe, then when we are injected with fear, all of that fear starts to wake back up again, regardless of where it came from, because it's all from the same source. It's just an activated, emotional, incoherent waveform. So as far as light goes, the name of the game, again, I'll just use this very simple osteopathic expression, which is the body is inclined toward the health, or AKA love. And so we are self-tuning, self-healing, self-regulating bodies. And some of what can happen is that when we have a lot that's in storage undigested, and we don't necessarily know it, if we've been trying to outrun our feelings, compartmentalize, and move quickly through life, then, I'm with Adam. I walk this. I am just a walking, self-tuning body. And I love being in my body. I treat my body every day. I exercise every day. I'm in the sun. I'm earthing. I'm doing all the things, eating organic. But also knowing this piece about the things in the body that want to go back toward the frequency of light. That's another big part of the conversation as well.
So I just love the way that she describes how emotions affect the physical body and affect health, because sometimes I do find it difficult to describe myself, even though I absolutely know that it's real. So let's move on to the third clip, where the presenter is talking about the power of joy to transform and heal.
I saw one of your previous interviews, Dr. Oliva and Adam, where it was so profound, and I will never forget this. I've been telling everyone this. I just said this to Chris. When you said that your father, when he would look at a live blood analysis, and let's say the pH was off or something like that, he said the one thing that would always transform blood and make it heal was to be in a place of joy. Mm-hmm. And when I think about the fear that is generated by all these people, and we're keeping everyone in fear, and I think about your father now and him seeing what joy does to the blood, I was blown away. I mean, I went back to my partner and said, honey, we're getting to more joy. I said, we're seeking the joy,
Awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So I love with that. I want to ask Jess Bell and then Dr. Christian Northrup, talk to me about the blood and the biofield energies and how does that relate?
Oh, it's a great question. So the founder of osteopathy in the late 1800s, Dr. Andrew Taylor Still, he had a quote that said, the artery is the rule. And then he also said that the role of the osteopath is to irrigate the withering fields of the body.
Wow.
And just saying that out loud, I have chills, because isn't that the truth? He's talking about the blood, irrigating the withering fields of the body with the blood.
I'm getting
And
chills.
so an osteopath, I know, it's powerful. And so an osteopath is trained. I work differently now than traditional osteopaths were trained back then, although I do believe that the traditional osteopathic modality was not just hands-on, even though the American Osteopathic Association says that it is, because we can work holographically, and I do. So the hands-on osteopath, what are they doing? They're taking the frequency of love, healing hands, and they're placing those hands on the surface of the body and synchronizing all the way down into the cellular fluid, the blood of the body, and tuning the instrument of the body or the blood back to that frequency of joy, love, coherence. And that is how we irrigate the withering field. I work this way. I've been working this way for a long time, but it really wasn't until I started to understand the role of the biofield and how the biofield actually infuses the body with more frequency, voltage, love. And as we begin now to work from the level of the biofield and bring biophotonic light back inside of the body, guess what happens to those withering fields within the body? Right? Now we have floods, and there's nothing that can grow in there because there's no withering field anymore. So modern medicine and even traditional osteopathy has divorced the biofield from the body, because the biofield is actually the source of so much of the vitality that then feeds right back into the blood, that feeds back into the cells. And so now when we can work holographically and we can measure this using dark field microscopy, which is something that we're going to be doing, we can actually start to capture what happens at the level of the blood as we comb, and this is something that I do with all the people that I work with, myself included, is to work at the level of the body, also bringing the biophotons from the field back into the body. And what I am so curious to find out, and this is something that we'll be doing, is now what's happening to the blood. When we can take our hands magnetically and work at the level of anatomy inside of the body and bring all of that back into circulation, look out, because there is nothing that can live in a body that is not then in the resonance of love, joy, right? Disease is just the absence of that biophotonic light within the cellular arterial system. So this is the end of disease as we know it.
So as you can see, this is a very, very fascinating subject to consider and learn about. And it's been 25 years since I was introduced to these concepts, albeit in a different way. I came to it through my Qigong training and then through various other emotional healing modalities. But really, what we're talking about is that the body can either be in a state of fear or it can be in a state of love. So if it's in a state of fear, then we're going to be experiencing emotions like anger, hurt, sadness, fear, and that is going to put the body into the sympathetic nervous system state. It's going to put it on red alert because it thinks it's in danger. And that is very, very stressful and distressing and exhausting for the body. And it's not designed to operate long-term in that mode. We're not designed to be stressed all the time. We're not designed to be on red alert all the time. But this is what happens for many, many people. They're living in a constant state of fear, and it becomes so automatic they don't even realize it. And this is what happened for me. And it wasn't until I recognized that I was actually unconsciously addicted to being stressed that I really started to understand the topic of stress and what a massive role it plays in the creation of illness. Because the opposite of being stressed is to be in the parasympathetic mode and to feel safe. And when we feel truly safe and nurtured, then we will feel a great deal of peace and harmony inside us, and we will experience emotions like peace and joy and love. Now, these are two completely different states to be in, to either be in fear and stress or to be in love. And this is why we have to learn, okay, well, where am I at? And what has created or is continuing to create me staying in this stress response? And what is it that I need to do to reduce my stress, both externally and internally, so that I can retrain my body back into a state of peace and harmony? And in a previous podcast, I talked about the inner smile meditation, which I did nearly every day for 9 years. And one of the things that we would do would be to smile to our heart and connect with and grow the amount of joy and love inside. And it has a profound effect, of course, on the body, and in particular on the blood, because when we smile to our heart and the energetic frequency of our heart changes, which automatically changes the chemistry of our body and our heart and our cells, and we circulate love through the blood, which is pumped through the heart, we circulate this love through our body to every cell in our body. This has a very real effect in helping us to feel better mentally, emotionally, and physically. And if we think of the people who have been injured by the vax, could this be something that they could do to help themselves heal? I would say yes. It is so important to change the energy and the information in our body, which will help us to heal. And it doesn't matter what we're trying to heal from, it will help us to heal. So the last excerpt I'm going to play is about this power of love to heal and love versus fear. And what is really interesting in this clip is how this therapist has discovered that people with the vax injury were in a way potentially already indisposed to the injury because of the levels of fear that they were already holding inside their body. And what I find interesting about this is that for many years I've worked with people to heal from conditions like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, post-viral fatigue, ME, illnesses which are predominantly about being in chronic fatigue or pain. And one of the turning points for me in my learning about the healing of these illnesses is that the body was already in a state where it was about to break down, so to speak, and get ill. And it just needed that one last straw. And so what usually happens for a lot of people is that they're constantly pushing themselves and being exhausted and overdoing it and tolerating maybe abuse, working themselves too hard, holding in years of trauma, and their body is trying to cope with it. And at a certain point, it just says, I can't do this anymore. And then it gets sick. And people call that a virus. And they get really, really sick with a high fever. And then afterwards, they feel absolutely exhausted. And then they can't get better. And then people think, oh, well, I'm not getting better because I just had a virus. And that's the cause of the illness and not getting better. But actually, there was a whole history before the inverted commas virus set in, where they were exhausting and wearing down their body, and finally the body just had to crash, and that's when a so-called opportunistic virus takes hold. So the reason for sharing this is that maybe it is possible that people who were vaccine injured were already in a state where their body and their immune system was weakened, and the vaccine was the last straw, which is maybe why some people were affected badly while others have not been affected at all. Now, I don't know, these are just thoughts that I'm putting out here, but I would say, for example, for people with long COVID, that this could be in play. They may say, oh, well, I was fine before, but were they really fine before? And if we were to potentially assess their lives and do a full life history, we might find that their body was actually or had been under a lot of stress, and then they got COVID, inverted commas, and then they got long COVID and couldn't recover properly. This may be in play. So let me play this excerpt on the importance of love versus fear.
And so at this point, what I have been doing is going all the way down to the energy center that then feeds into the body. So I've gone all the way down to the root, really, the central channel, the 6 main energetic centers. And so here's what I've found within people who've been vaccinated who believe that they have been injured. So working at the level of the energy center, their heart center actually is slightly, it's not disconnected and it's not blocked. I don't like the word block, but what has happened is I'm seeing that there is a little bit less of an abundance of that God sense inside of them. It's almost as if I love what you're saying about the physical body, because the physical body is actually not where I'm seeing the injury from these shots. I'm actually seeing it at the energetic system. Wow. And that which we, because that's the love that we know that we are. So when we're connected to ourselves at that level, we are empowered in that, infused with that source. And nothing can penetrate us at that point. But that's where these impediments are, I'll call them. So part of what I do is go down to, I've had to go kind of excavate down to the level of where the energy feeds into the tissues of the body. That's where I'm actually seeing. So it's really interesting. And I love that I'm hearing this isn't found in the blood. And because of the level of the gift that I've been given, I've actually been able to see the root of where the disconnection is. And it's really not that. And the moment that my attention goes there and we're going into the love, we're made of love. And so as soon as that, whatever that thing is, that's creating the constriction, as that energy feeds into the body, you shine a light on anything and it just goes right back to love. The body's inclined toward the health. So the moment that we bring awareness to wherever that body is in a state of dis-ease or incoherence or the absence of flow, as we've been talking about, the moment we actually connect that back to flow, whatever the thing is that got in, whether it's a pharmaceutical, an antibiotic, a shot, a mercury filling, a root canal, like whatever it is that we've been now programmed to fear, it goes away.
So as Jess explains, illness starts at the energetic level, which is where I started this podcast from. It's about energy, it's about chi, it's about energy and information, the information which impregnates the chi. And this is why it's so important to do our emotional healing and to change our unhealthy mental patterns, the patterns of consciousness, and to change our vibration through working on ourselves from the inside out. This is only change that can come about through doing the inner work, working on changing our feelings and changing our mind thoughts and mind patterns is only something that we can do. Yes, we can get help to make those changes, and sometimes we need to get help to make those changes, but nobody else can do it for us. But the good news is we can do it. So we can learn to change the energy and information in our body and transform ourselves mentally and emotionally and energetically, and that will help the body to heal physically. So there's much more that I could say, but I will leave that here for you to contemplate. And I hope it's been interesting. I certainly found this conversation with Renette Sinham very, very interesting. So this is Kim, the Kiwi Health Detective, root cause and lifestyle practitioner, signing off.